Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crystal Shard. The massive vessel cut through space like a blade made of living light. Its crystalline hull caught the distant stars and threw their light back in brilliant patterns. Around him, his crew worked at stations that glowed with soft blue energy. They were Zephyrians, tall beings with skin like polished stone and eyes that shone like gems. The Admiral looked out at the star system spread before them. 3 rocky planets orbited a dying orange star. The second planet showed signs of life once, but now it was just a brown ball of dust. Perfect for mining. His ships had been here for 6 months, taking everything useful from the dead world. Iron, rare metals, anything the Hegemony could use. "Status report," Kethvar said. His voice was deep and cold, like stones grinding together. Commander Veltar moved to his side. She was younger than the Admiral, but her eyes held the same cruel intelligence that marked all successful Hegemony officers. "The mining operations are ahead of schedule, sir. We have extracted 70% of the planet's useful materials. The automated systems are working perfectly." Kethvar nodded. The Hegemony had been doing this for 300 years. They found worlds with useful resources, took what they wanted, and moved on. Sometimes there were people living on these worlds. Those people learned to serve the Hegemony, or they died. It was simple and effective. "What about the surveys of nearby systems?" he asked. Veltar touched a control, and a star map appeared in the air between them. Dozens of systems glowed in different colors. Red meant already conquered. Blue meant currently being stripped of resources. Yellow meant future targets. "The long-range sensors have found several interesting possibilities," she said. "There is one system that keeps appearing in our reports. The locals call it Saul. It has a small blue planet, third from its star." Kethvar studied the display. The Saul system was marked in yellow, but with a note that made him pause. "What do our sensors tell us about this world?" "Very primitive, sir. They have basic nuclear technology, but nothing that could threaten us. The planet sends out radio signals constantly. Our translation computers have been studying their communications for decades." The Admiral moved closer to the display. A detailed image of the blue planet appeared. It looked peaceful from space. White clouds swirled over blue oceans and green continents. "What do these communications tell us about them?" Veltar smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "They are divided into many small nations that fight among themselves constantly. They argue about resources, territory, and belief systems. Their weapons are crude chemical explosives and basic fusion devices. They have barely begun to explore their own star system. Population? Approximately 8 billion individuals. They call themselves humans. They would make excellent workers once properly trained." Kethvar had heard this story many times before. Young species, barely out of their caves, thinking they ruled their little worlds. Then the Hegemony arrived and showed them how small they really were. It always ended the same way. "How long before we can begin operations there?" he asked. "Our current projections suggest we can begin the approach in 6 months. The standard protocol will apply. We offer them the choice to surrender and serve or face destruction. Given their primitive technology, they will likely choose surrender once they see our ships." The Admiral turned away from the display. Through the crystal walls of the bridge, he could see other Hegemony ships at work. Massive mining vessels stripped the dead planet below. Escort ships patrolled the system's edges. Everything moved with the smooth efficiency of a machine that had been running for centuries. "There is something else, sir," Veltar said carefully. Kethvar looked back at her. "Yes?" "The energy readings from the Saul system are unusual. Our sensors detect nuclear signatures, as I mentioned. But there are also some readings we cannot fully explain. The science division believes they might be experimental power sources." "Dangerous?" "Unlikely, sir. The humans appear to be at least 50 years behind our own technology. Even if they have developed some advanced power sources, they lack the knowledge to weaponize them effectively. Kethvar considered this. In 3 centuries of expansion, the hegemony had encountered thousands of species. Some were peaceful. Some fought back. None had ever posed a real threat to hegemony ships. Their crystal hulls could absorb most energy weapons. Their quantum drives let them appear anywhere in a system instantly. Their gravitational weapons could crack planets. "Continue monitoring the system," he ordered. "I want complete intelligence before we arrive. Study their military capabilities, their population centers, their resource distribution, the usual preparation." "Yes, sir. Our stealth probes are already in position at the edge of their system. They have not detected them." This was standard procedure. The hegemony never attacked without knowing everything about their target. Stealth probes would watch for months, mapping every ship, every weapon, every city. By the time the main fleet arrived, they would know exactly where to strike for maximum effect. Kethvar walked to another part of the bridge where star charts showed the full scope of hegemony territory. Hundreds of systems glowed under there. Control. Thousands of worlds provided resources and workers. The blue planet called Earth would soon be just another dot on this map. "Sir," called another officer from across the bridge, "we are receiving a priority message from Hegemony Command." "Put it through." The air shimmered and a figure appeared. It was High Admiral Zonkar, one of the most powerful beings in the hegemony. His crystalline form was larger than most Zephyrians, and veins of gold ran through his transparent skin. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute power. "Admiral Kethvar, your mining operations in the Kepler system are proceeding well?" "Yes, High Admiral. We are ahead of schedule." "Good. I am contacting you because the Council has approved expansion into Sector 7749. This includes the system you have been monitoring." Kethvar felt a moment of satisfaction. "The Saul system, sir?" "Correct. Intelligence suggests it will be a routine operation. The species there appears to be typical for their level of development. Divided, primitive, and completely unaware of our existence." "When do you want us to begin?" "Complete your current operations first. Then take your battle group to Saul and begin standard pacification procedures. The Council expects this to be finished within 1 planetary rotation, 1 day. That was how long the High Admiral expected it to take to conquer an entire world. Kethvar had to admit, it was usually about right. Most species surrendered as soon as they saw hegemony ships in their sky. "Understood, sir. We will not disappoint the Council." "I know you will not. Zonkar out." The image faded, leaving Kethvar alone with his thoughts. Another world to conquer, another species to bring under hegemony control. It had become routine, almost boring. He wondered sometimes if there was any species out there that could provide a real challenge. Veltar approached him again. "Sir, shall I begin preparations for the Saul operation?" "Yes. I want a full battle group, 12 cruisers, 30 destroyers, and support vessels. If these humans have any surprises, I want to be ready for them." "That seems like excessive force for such a primitive species, sir." Kethvar looked at her with eyes that had seen 100 worlds fall. "Commander, in 3 centuries of expansion, do you know what has taught the hegemony the most?" "No, sir." "That there is no such thing as excessive force. Better to arrive with too many ships than too few. Better to end a conflict quickly than let it drag on. These humans may be primitive, but they are still an unknown factor." "Of course, sir. I will begin the preparations immediately." As Veltar walked away, Kethvar returned his attention to the star map. The Saul system hung there in space, waiting. Its 3rd planet continued its slow orbit around its yellow star, completely unaware that its fate had already been decided in the cold depths of space. The Admiral had no way of knowing that on the blue planet below, 8 billion humans were not the primitive creatures they appeared to be. He could not see the hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt or the massive defense platforms disguised. as space junk. He did not know that every radio signal his probes intercepted was carefully crafted to tell him exactly what humanity wanted him to believe. Most importantly, he had no idea that somewhere in the darkness between the stars, human ships were already watching his fleet. They had been watching for months, learning everything about hegemony technology, tactics, and weaknesses. The trap was set. All that remained was for the prey to walk into it. Kethvar smiled as he looked at the peaceful blue world on his display. In a few months, that world would kneel before the might of the hegemony, or so he believed. The crystal shard continued its journey through space, carrying its crew toward what they thought would be another easy victory. Behind them, the dead planet they had been mining continued to spin slowly in the darkness, stripped of everything valuable. Soon Admiral Kethvar would learn that sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the command center deep beneath the surface of Luna. Around her, hundreds of technicians worked at stations that hummed with quiet energy. The room was carved from solid rock and lined with metal that could block any known scanning technology. For 50 years, this place had been humanity's greatest secret. Status report, Sarah said, her voice calm despite the tension in the room. Major Williams, her military liaison, checked his tablet. Alien probe activity has increased 20% in the last week. They're getting bolder, moving closer to Earth's orbit. Sarah nodded. They had been tracking the Zephyrian probes for months. The alien devices were clever, using stealth technology. That would have fooled most species. But humanity had advantages the aliens didn't know about. Earth's deep space monitoring network had detected the probes the moment they entered the outer solar system. "Are our deception protocols still working?" she asked. "Perfectly," replied Dr. Martinez from the communication station. "The aliens continue to intercept our fake radio signals. As far as they know, we're still fighting wars over oil and arguing about climate change." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The deception had been her idea, developed during the early days of the Terran Defense Initiative. When humanity first detected alien technology in nearby star systems, they faced a choice. They could try to hide and hope the aliens never found Earth, or they could prepare for war while making the aliens think they were still primitive. They chose to prepare. "Dr. Chen," called another technician, "we're receiving the scheduled update from Mars Command. Put it through." A holographic image appeared in the center of the room. It showed a man in a crisp military uniform standing in what looked like a simple research station. Behind him, red Martian landscape stretched to the horizon. But Sarah knew the truth. Beneath that innocent-looking surface lay one of humanity's most powerful military installations. "This is General Torres reporting from Mars," the image said. "All defensive systems are operational. The aliens continue to classify our installations as mining operations. They have no idea what they're actually looking at." Sarah felt a moment of pride. The Mars bases had been incredibly difficult to build without attracting attention. Every piece of equipment had to be disguised. Every energy signature had to match what primitive humans might produce. But it had worked. The aliens saw mining equipment where humanity had built missile launchers and beam weapons. "What about the asteroid belt?" she asked. "All 27 hidden bases are ready," Torres replied. "The aliens' own scans show them as simple mining operations. They have no idea that each asteroid contains enough firepower to destroy a city. The asteroid belt had been humanity's greatest engineering achievement. Over 30 years, they had hollowed out dozens of asteroids and turned them into hidden fortresses. From the outside, they looked like ordinary space rocks. Inside, they were packed with weapons, fighters, and support systems. "Jupiter Command report," Sarah said. Another image appeared, this one showing a woman with short gray hair standing on what appeared to be a simple space station. "Admiral Singh here. The gas giant defense network is fully operational. We have 147 unmanned platforms hidden in Jupiter's atmosphere. The alien sensors cannot penetrate the radiation and magnetic interference, Ray." had to admire the audacity of that particular project. Humanity had built an entire fleet of robotic warships and hidden them in Jupiter's crushing atmosphere. The Zephyrians would never think to look there. Earth orbital defense, she continued. All systems green, reported Colonel Park from another station. We have 64 defense platforms operating under civilian disguises. The aliens see communication satellites and weather monitoring stations. They don't know that each one is armed with kinetic weapons and point defense systems. The deception had required incredible coordination. Every aspect of human technology visible to alien scanners had to tell the same story. They were a young species, barely capable of basic spaceflight, definitely not a threat to anyone. Meanwhile, humanity's real technology advanced in secret. Underground laboratories developed weapons the aliens had never seen. Hidden shipyards built vessels designed specifically to fight Zephyrian ships. Intelligence networks studied every detail of alien technology and tactics. Dr. Chen, Major, Williams said quietly. We're getting reports from our deep space scouts. The alien fleet is beginning to move. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. This was it. After 50 years of preparation, the test was finally coming. How many ships? Preliminary count suggests over 200 vessels. Standard Hegemony battle group formation. 200 ships. It sounded overwhelming, but Sarah knew better. Humanity had been studying Zephyrian tactics for decades. They fought like a species that had never faced real resistance. Their formations were predictable. Their weapons were powerful but inflexible. Most importantly, they had no idea how to fight an enemy that fought back effectively. Signal all commands, she ordered. Operation Lighthouse is now active. Around the room, technicians began entering commands. Across the solar system, humanity's hidden defenses began coming online, but they did it slowly, carefully, making it look like random system activations rather than coordinated military preparation. On her main display, Sarah could see the alien fleet approaching. The ships were beautiful in their own way, crystalline vessels that caught and reflected starlight. But they were also arrogant. They moved in perfect formation, broadcasting their approach like they owned the space they traveled through. Dr. Chen, called the communications officer. We're receiving a transmission from the alien fleet. It's on standard radio frequencies. Let's hear it. A voice filled the command center. It spoke in heavily accented English, clearly using translation software. People of Earth, this is Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Hegemony. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our empire. You will surrender unconditionally and prepare to serve your new masters. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. Sarah looked around the room. Every face showed the same expression. Grim determination mixed with barely controlled anger. For 50 years, they had worked toward this moment. Now it was time to show these aliens what humanity was really capable of. Open a channel, she ordered. All frequencies. Channel open, ma'am. Sarah took a deep breath. What she said next would change everything. This is Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of Terran Defense. Admiral Kethvar, your intelligence about our species is seriously flawed. We are not the primitive civilization you believe us to be. You have made a terrible mistake. She paused, letting that sink in. Across the solar system, hidden weapon systems finished their activation sequences. In the asteroid belt, camouflaged hatches opened to reveal missile launchers. On Mars, defensive platforms rose from underground, bunkers. Around Earth, satellites shed their civilian disguises and revealed their true purpose. For 50 years, we have watched you, Sarah continued. We have studied your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. We know exactly how you fight, because you always fight the same way. You attack primitive species that cannot defend themselves. On her tactical display, she could see confusion in the alien fleet formation. Ships were slowing down, running, deeper scans, trying to understand what they were really facing. Today, Admiral, you learn what happens when you try to attack a species that can fight back. Welcome to Saul's system. You are not our conquerors. You are our prey. Sarah cut the transmission and turned to her staff. All commands are authorized. To engage. Show them what we've built. Across the solar system, humanity's true power revealed itself. Asteroid bases dropped their camouflage and began launching fighters. Mars' defensive platforms emerged from underground bunkers, their weapons already tracking alien ships. The gas giant bases in Jupiter's atmosphere powered up their drives and began rising toward open space. But the real surprise was waiting in Earth's orbit. What the aliens had thought were communication satellites suddenly moved with purpose. Their solar panels folded back to reveal weapon systems. Their simple-looking exteriors split apart to show sophisticated defensive arrays. Admiral Kethvar's voice crackled over the radio, and for the first time it sounded uncertain. "This is impossible. Our intelligence showed—" "Your intelligence showed exactly what we wanted it to show," Sarah replied. "Every radio signal you intercepted was fake. Every energy reading you detected was carefully staged. Every piece of data you collected was designed to make you underestimate us." She walked to the main tactical display, where the alien fleet's formation was beginning to break apart. Ships were peeling away from the main group, trying to get better sensor readings on the defensive systems that were appearing all around them. "You see, Admiral, humanity learned something very important early in our history. The best way to survive a predator is to make it think you're not worth hunting. But we also learned that sometimes the predator comes anyway. When that happens, you have to be ready." On the display, she could see the first human ships decloaking. They had been there all along, hidden in the shadow of Earth's moon, using stealth technology that made them invisible to Zephyrian sensors. But now they revealed themselves, and they were magnificent. 6 massive vessels, each one over a kilometer long, moved with deadly grace toward the alien fleet. These were humanity's Dreadnoughts, the most powerful warships ever built. Around them, smaller vessels spread out in attack formation. "My God," whispered Major Williams. "It's really happening." Sarah nodded. After 50 years of hiding, humanity was finally showing its true face to the galaxy. The scared, primitive species was gone. In its place stood something the aliens had never encountered before. A species that had spent decades preparing for exactly this moment. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Execute Plan Alpha. Let's show these aliens how humans really fight." The battle for Earth was about to begin, but it would not be the easy conquest Admiral Kethvar had expected. Instead, it would be the first lesson in a hard truth the galaxy was about to learn. Humanity had never been the prey. They had always been the predators. Admiral Kethvar stared at his tactical display in growing disbelief. What had started as a routine conquest was turning into something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of military service. The primitive species they had come to subjugate was revealing weapons and defenses that should not exist. "Report!" he barked at his tactical officer. Commander Veltar's voice was tight with confusion. "Sir, we are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. The humans have been hiding military installations everywhere. Our initial scans were completely wrong." On the main screen, Admiral Kethvar watched human ships decloak around Earth's moon. They were enormous, larger than most Hegemony cruisers, and their hulls were covered in weapon systems he didn't recognize. Worse, they moved with a coordination that spoke of unified command and extensive training. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our intelligence reports showed a divided species with primitive technology." "Sir, I believe we have been deceived," Veltar said quietly. "The radio transmissions we intercepted, the energy readings we detected, all of it appears to have been deliberately falsified." Admiral Kethvar felt a chill run through his crystalline body. In 300 years of expansion, the Hegemony had never encountered a species capable of such sophisticated deception. Most primitive worlds didn't even know how to hide there. military assets, let alone create elaborate false intelligence. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Battle Formation Alpha, all ships prepare for combat." "Sir," called another officer, "we are receiving targeting locks from multiple sources. The humans appear to have weapons platforms throughout the asteroid belt, on several planets and in orbit around their homeworld." The Admiral studied his tactical display. Red warning icons were appearing everywhere, marking human weapon systems that had been invisible just minutes ago. It was like watching a spider's web reveal itself around trapped prey, except he was beginning to realize that his fleet might be the prey. "Open fire," he commanded. "Target the largest human vessels first." The crystal shard's main cannon powered up, drawing energy from the ship's quantum core. Around the fleet, other hegemony vessels did the same. Brilliant beams of coherent energy lanced out toward the human ships, weapons that had reduced entire cities to vapor. Admiral Kethvar expected to see the human vessels destroyed instantly. Instead, he watched in amazement as the energy beams struck some kind of defensive field around the human ships and simply disappeared. "Sir," Veltar reported, her voice now openly worried, "our weapons are having no effect. The humans appear to have developed some form of energy absorption technology. That's impossible. No species at their level of development should have that capability. Perhaps they are not at the level of development we believed, sir." Before Admiral Kethvar could respond, the human fleet opened fire. But they didn't use energy weapons like every other species in the galaxy. Instead, they launched what appeared to be simple metal projectiles. The Admiral almost laughed at the primitive nature of the attack. Then the first projectiles struck his ships. The kinetic rounds moved at impossible speeds, accelerated by magnetic fields to a significant fraction of light speed. When they hit the crystalline hulls of hegemony ships, they didn't just punch holes. They transferred so much energy that entire sections of hulls simply vaporized. "Damage report!" the Admiral shouted as his flagship shook under the impact of multiple hits. "Sir, we have lost 3 destroyers and 2 cruisers. The human weapons are somehow penetrating our crystal armor like it doesn't exist." Admiral Kethvar stared at the tactical display. 5 ships destroyed in the opening moments of combat. In 3 centuries of warfare, the hegemony had never lost ships that quickly to any enemy. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. Commander Veltar was working frantically at her station. "Sir, our analysis suggests the humans are using pure kinetic energy. No exotic particles, no quantum effects, just solid matter moving at extremely high velocity. But our armor is designed to absorb energy attacks." "Yes, sir. But kinetic energy is different. It's not something our defenses were designed to counter." The Admiral felt a moment of genuine fear. The hegemony's military doctrine was based on energy weapons and crystal armor. They had never encountered an enemy that fought with different principles. It was like bringing shields to fight against clubs, only to discover that clubs could break shields. "Signal the fleet, scatter formation, make us harder targets." But even as he gave the order, Admiral Kethvar realized it might be too late. The human ships were moving with purpose, not panic. They split into smaller groups and began attacking different parts of his fleet simultaneously. This wasn't the desperate defense of a primitive species. It was the coordinated assault of a military that had been planning this battle for years. "Sir, we are detecting massive launch signatures from the asteroid belt," reported another officer. "Hundreds of missiles inbound." On the tactical display, Admiral Kethvar watched a cloud of human missiles streak toward his fleet. They moved in complex patterns, using the gravitational fields of planets and moons to alter their courses unpredictably. His ship's point defense systems tried to intercept them, but the missiles were too fast and too numerous. The first wave struck home, and Admiral Kethvar watched in horror as 6 more of his ships disappeared from the tactical display. The missiles carried fusion warheads that detonated against his ship's hulls with devastating effect. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No primitive species should have this level of technology." "Sir," Commander Veltar said urgently. "I don't think they are primitive. I think they have been hiding their true capabilities from us." Admiral Kethvar was beginning to reach the same conclusion. Everything about this battle was wrong. Humans fought like a species with centuries of military experience. Their weapons were specifically designed to counter hegemony technology. Their tactics showed deep understanding of how his fleet would respond. "Signal Hegemony Command," he ordered. "Priority emergency transmission. We need immediate reinforcement." "Sir, the humans are jamming our quantum communications. We cannot reach command." The Admiral felt his confidence crumbling. Quantum communication was supposed to be impossible to jam. The humans shouldn't even know it existed, let alone have the technology to block it. On his main screen, he watched the largest human ship turn toward his flagship. It was massive, bristling with weapons that were already rotating to target him. But what frightened him most was the name painted on its hull in bold letters: Terra's Wrath. "Incoming transmission from the human fleet," reported his communications officer. "Put it through." A human face appeared on the screen. It was a woman, with short dark hair and cold eyes that reminded Admiral Kethvar uncomfortably of his own expression when facing a defeated enemy. When she spoke, her voice was calm and professional. "Admiral Kethvar, this is Captain Maria Vasquez of the Terran. Navy, I strongly suggest you surrender your remaining ships. You are outgunned and outmaneuvered." "This is impossible," Admiral Kethvar said. "Your species is primitive. Our intelligence clearly showed—" "Your intelligence showed exactly what we wanted it to show," Captain Vasquez interrupted. "For 50 years, we have been studying your technology and tactics. We know how you fight because you always fight the same way. You attack species that cannot defend themselves." Admiral Kethvar looked at his tactical display. He had started the battle with over 200 ships. Now he had fewer than 150. The humans had lost no ships at all. "What do you want?" he asked. "We want you to understand something very important," Captain Vasquez replied. "Earth is not a primitive world waiting to be conquered. It is the home of a species that has been preparing for this moment for decades. You came here expecting to find prey. Instead, you found predators." As if to emphasize her point, another wave of human missiles struck the Hegemony fleet. Admiral Kethvar watched helplessly as more of his ships died. The battle was becoming a massacre, and his forces were the victims. "How did you hide this from us?" he demanded. "Easily," Captain Vasquez said with a cold smile. "Your species is arrogant. You see what you expect to see. You expected to find a divided, primitive species, so that's what we showed you. Every radio signal we transmitted, every energy signature we allowed you to detect, all of it was carefully designed to reinforce your assumptions." Admiral Kethvar realized the terrible truth. Humanity had been watching the Hegemony for decades, learning their weaknesses, preparing for exactly this scenario. The Hegemony had never faced an enemy that understood them so completely. "Surrender now," Captain Vasquez continued, "and I will allow your surviving ships to leave this system. Continue fighting, and I will destroy every last one of them." Admiral Kethvar looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at him with expressions of shock and growing despair. They had never been in a battle like this. The Hegemony always had overwhelming technological advantage. Now they were the inferior force, and they didn't know how to handle it. "Sir," Commander Veltar said quietly, "our casualties are approaching 60%. At this rate, we will lose the entire fleet within the hour." The Admiral stared at the tactical display. The human ships were closing in, their weapons charged and ready. He had never retreated from a battle in his life, but he had also never faced certain annihilation. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "General retreat. All ships withdraw to the edge of the system." It was the most humiliating moment of Admiral Kethvar's long career. But as he watched his remaining ships flee from the human defenders, he knew it was also the smart decision. Staying would only mean the complete destruction of his force. As the crystal shard powered up its quantum drive, Admiral Kethvar took one last look at the blue planet called Earth. He had come here expecting easy conquest. Instead, he had encountered something the Hegemony had never faced before, a truly dangerous enemy. The retreat from Saul's system would be remembered throughout Hegemony space, but Admiral Kethvar suspected it was only the beginning. The humans had shown they could defend their home. Now they would show the galaxy what happened when Earth went on the attack. High Admiral Zonkar stood in the war room of the Hegemony's most secure facility, deep beneath the crystal spires of Zephyr Prime. Around him, the greatest military minds in the Empire struggled to understand what had happened at Sol System. The holographic display showed Admiral Kethvar's fleet, or what remained of it, limping back to Hegemony space with over half their ships destroyed. "Explain to me again how a primitive species destroyed an entire battle group," Zonkar said, his voice echoing with barely controlled fury. General Mordak, the Hegemony's chief tactical analyst, manipulated the display to show the battle's progression. "High Admiral, our initial assessment was completely wrong. The humans are not primitive. They have been deliberately hiding their true capabilities for decades." Zonkar studied the tactical data. Human ships appeared from nowhere, armed with weapons that somehow penetrated crystal armor. Their defensive systems absorbed energy weapons that should have vaporized any ship. Most disturbing of all, they fought with a coordination and tactical awareness that suggested extensive military experience. "How did our intelligence fail so completely?" he demanded. "The humans have been conducting a deception operation of unprecedented scale," Mordak replied. "Every signal we intercepted, every energy reading we detected, all of it was falsified. They wanted us to believe they were divided and primitive." Zonkar felt something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. The Hegemony's expansion had been built on overwhelming technological superiority. They conquered species that couldn't fight back effectively. But these humans had not only fought back, they had won decisively. "What are our options?" he asked. "We could assemble a larger fleet," suggested Admiral Velnash from across the room. 500 ships instead of 200. Overwhelming force. Zonkar considered this. The Hegemony had thousands of ships spread across dozens of sectors. They could certainly put together a massive assault force. But something about the human victory troubled him. It wasn't just that they had won, it was how they had won. Their tactics suggested they understood Hegemony military doctrine better than most Hegemony officers. "High Admiral," called another officer from the communications station. "We are receiving reports from Sector 7751. 3 of our outposts have gone dark." Zonkar turned toward the communications station. "Gone dark? What does that mean?" "Sir, we lost contact with mining operations in the Tau Ceti system, the Wolf 359 system, and Proxima Centauri. All 3 systems went silent within the last 12 hours. The High Admiral felt a chill run through his crystalline body. Those systems were nowhere near Saul. They were spread across different sectors, hundreds of light years apart. There was no way the humans could have attacked all 3 simultaneously with conventional forces. "Show me a map of the affected systems," he ordered. A star chart appeared in the air above the table. The 3 dark systems were marked in red, spread across a wide area of space. But as Zonkar studied the display, he began to see a pattern. All 3 systems were isolated outposts with minimal defenses. All 3 were important sources of rare materials. And all 3 were positioned along major supply routes. They're not attacking randomly, he realized. "They're targeting our supply lines." General Mordak leaned forward to study the map. "But how are they moving so quickly between systems? Our ships took weeks to reach Saul from the nearest base. The humans would need faster-than-light travel capabilities we don't possess." Unless they already had ships in position, Zonkar said quietly. Unless they've been planning this for much longer than we thought. The implications were staggering. If the humans had been secretly building ships and positioning them throughout hegemony space, it would represent a level of strategic planning that no species had ever achieved. It would mean they had been preparing for war while making the hegemony believe they were still primitive. "Sir," called another officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Rigel sector. Admiral Koss reports that her patrol fleet has encountered human ships near the Vega system." "How many ships?" Zonkar demanded. 6 vessels, sir. The humans offered Admiral Koss a choice: withdraw immediately or face destruction. And Admiral Koss chose to engage, sir. We lost contact with her fleet 14 minutes ago. Zonkar stared at the tactical display as the terrible truth became clear. The humans weren't just defending their home system, they were launching a coordinated offensive against hegemony territory. And they were winning. "How many fleets do we have in the affected sectors?" he asked. 17 battle groups, sir. A total of nearly 800 ships. Signal all commanders. Full alert status. All fleets are to assume defensive positions and avoid engagement with human forces until further orders. General Mordak looked surprised. "Sir, are we retreating from a single species?" Zonkar turned to face his officers. In the holographic display behind him, red markers continued appearing as more hegemony outposts went silent. The humans were moving through hegemony space like a plague, destroying everything in their path. "We are not retreating," he said firmly. "We are regrouping. These humans fight differently than any species we have encountered. They use tactics we have never seen. Until we understand how they operate, we cannot defeat them." But even as he spoke, Zonkar knew the situation was worse than he was admitting. The hegemony had built their empire by conquering weak species. Their ships were designed to fight enemies with inferior technology. Their tactics were based on overwhelming firepower against helpless targets. The humans had turned that advantage against them. They fought like predators that had studied their prey for years. Every attack was precisely targeted, every engagement was planned to maximize hegemony casualties while minimizing their own losses. "Sir," called the communications officer again, "we're receiving reports from across the Empire. Human ships have been spotted in 17 different sectors. They appear to be targeting our most important supply depots and manufacturing centers." Zonkar felt his crystalline hands clench into fists. The humans weren't just attacking randomly, they were systematically dismantling the infrastructure that kept the hegemony functioning. Supply lines, communication relays, manufacturing centers, all the vital organs of the Empire were being cut out with surgical precision. "They know exactly where to hit us," he realized. "They have been studying our empire for decades." "How is that possible, sir?" asked General Mordak. "The same way they hid their military capabilities," Zonkar replied. "Patience and planning. While we thought we were watching them, they were watching us, learning our weaknesses, preparing for exactly this moment." On the tactical display, another system went dark, then another. The humans were moving through hegemony space like ghosts, striking without warning and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. It was a type of warfare the hegemony had never experienced. "High Admiral," called an aide from across the room. "The Council is requesting an immediate briefing on the situation." Zonkar nodded grimly. The Hegemony Council consisted of the most powerful beings in the Empire. They had grown accustomed to easy victories and constant expansion. Explaining that a single species was dismantling their empire would not be pleasant. "Tell the Council. I will address them within the hour," he said, "and send word to all sector commanders. I want every available ship pulled back to defend our core systems." "Sir, that will leave our outer territories completely undefended," General Mordak pointed out. "Our outer territories are already lost," Zonkar replied. "The humans are picking them apart piece by piece. Better to consolidate our forces and defend what we can hold." As his officers hurried to carry out his orders, Zonkar remained staring at the tactical display. The red markers indicating human attacks continued to spread across the map like drops of blood. In less than a day, these mysterious humans had accomplished what no enemy had done in 3 centuries. They had forced the hegemony onto the defensive. But what troubled Zonkar most was not the military situation. It was the realization that the humans had been planning this for decades while making the hegemony believe they were harmless. That level of deception required incredible patience and discipline. It suggested a species that thought in terms of generations rather than years. "Sir," called another officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. It's being broadcast on all frequencies throughout hegemony space. Put it through." A human face appeared on the main screen. It was an older man with gray hair and hard eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute command. "This is Admiral Torres of the Terran Navy. For 3 centuries, the hegemony has spread across the galaxy like a cancer, consuming worlds and enslaving species. Today, that ends." Zonkar found himself leaning forward despite himself. The human's presence was commanding, almost hypnotic. "We are not here to negotiate," Admiral Torres continued. "We are not here to bargain. We are here to demonstrate a simple truth. Every species you have conquered, every world you have stripped bare, every life you have destroyed will be avenged." The transmission showed images of human ships moving through space. They were magnificent. Vessels, sleek and deadly, moving with a grace that made hegemony ships look clumsy by comparison. "You came to our world expecting easy prey," Admiral Torres said. "Instead, you found predators. Now you will learn what it means to be hunted." The transmission ended, leaving the war room in stunned silence. Zonkar stared at the blank screen, trying to process what he had just heard. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were declaring war on the entire hegemony. "Sir," whispered General Mordak, "what do we do?" Zonkar looked around the room at his officers. For 3 centuries, they had been the hunters. They had spread fear across the galaxy, making other species tremble at the sight of their ships. Now, for the first time, they were the ones being hunted. "We survive," he said finally, "and we learn to fight a war we never expected to fight." But deep in his crystalline heart, High Admiral Zonkar feared it might already be too late. The humans had been preparing for this moment for 50 years. The hegemony had been preparing for easy conquests. The galaxy was about to discover which approach was more effective. Admiral Torres stood before the Galactic Council in the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime. The massive hall was carved from a single crystal and could hold representatives from over 100 species. Today, it was packed with delegates who had come to witness something unprecedented, the formal surrender of the Zephyrian hegemony. Around him, beings of dozens of different species watched in fascination and fear. Some had been conquered by the hegemony and enslaved for centuries. Others had managed to avoid conquest through isolation or tribute. All of them were trying to understand how a single species had brought down the galaxy's greatest empire in just 6 months. Admiral Torres wore his dress uniform, the deep blue fabric decorated with silver stars and the gold insignia of the Terran Navy. At his side stood Ambassador Chen, representing Earth's civilian government. Behind them, an honor guard of human marines stood at attention, their presence a reminder that humanity's words were backed by the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. At the center of the chamber sat the Council's high chair, occupied by Chancellor Vexara of the Nexus Collective. She was an ancient being, her translator devices allowing her to communicate with any species present. Her role was to maintain order and ensure that all voices were heard. "This session of the Galactic Council will come to order," Chancellor Vexara announced. "We are here to address the formal request for peace submitted by the Zephyrian hegemony and the conditions proposed by the Terran Federation." Admiral Torres watched as Ambassador Kala of the Hegemony entered the chamber. She moved slowly, her crystalline form dimmed with defeat. Once, she had represented the most feared empire in the galaxy. Now she came as a supplicant, begging for terms that would allow her species to survive. The Admiral remembered the reports from the final battle at Zephyr Prime. Human dreadnoughts had appeared in the system without warning, their weapons trained on the planet's surface. The message had been simple: surrender unconditionally, or watch your homeworld burn. The Hegemony had chosen survival. Ambassador Kala, Chancellor Vexara said formally, "You have come before this council to formally surrender on behalf of the Zephyrian Hegemony. Is this correct?" Kala's voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, Chancellor. The Hegemony formally surrenders to the Terran Federation and requests terms for peace." A murmur ran through the chamber. Many of the delegates had never expected to see this moment. The Hegemony had seemed invincible for 3 centuries. Now they were begging for mercy from a species most had never heard of 6 months ago. "Admiral Torres," the Chancellor continued, "the Terran Federation has agreed to accept this surrender. What are your terms?" Admiral Torres stepped forward. He had been preparing for this moment since the war began. The terms he was about to present would reshape the galaxy's balance of power forever. "The terms are simple," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "First, the immediate release of all enslaved species and the return of their homeworlds. Second, the complete dismantling of the Hegemony's military forces. Third, the payment of reparations to all species harmed by Hegemony expansion." "More," murmuring from the delegates. These were harsh terms, but not unexpectedly so. The Hegemony had shown no mercy to their victims. Few expected humanity to be more generous. "Fourth," Admiral Torres continued, "the establishment of the Terran Protection Accord. Any species that requests protection from aggression will receive it. The Terran Navy will maintain peacekeeping forces throughout the galaxy to ensure that what happened under the Hegemony never happens again." This caused a stir throughout the chamber. The Admiral was essentially offering to become the galaxy's police force. Some delegates looked relieved. Others appeared worried about trading one master for another. And finally, Admiral Torres said, his voice growing harder, "Any species that attempts to repeat the Hegemony's crimes will face the full might of the Terran Federation. We will not allow another empire of conquest to rise." Chancellor Vexara looked toward Ambassador Kala. "Do you accept these terms on behalf of the Hegemony?" Kala was silent for a long moment. Admiral Torres could see the struggle in her crystalline features. These terms would reduce the Hegemony from a galactic empire to a single planet. But the alternative was extinction. "We accept," she said finally. The chamber erupted in voices as delegates from dozens of species began talking at once. "Admiral," Torres waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. "There is one more thing," he said, and his words cut through the chatter like a blade. "I want to address a question I know many of you are thinking. You're wondering if humanity will become the new Hegemony, if we'll use our power to conquer and enslave like they did." He paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of faces watching him. Beings who had lived under Hegemony rule for generations, who had never known freedom, who were afraid to hope for something better. "The answer is no," Admiral Torres said firmly. "Humanity did not fight this war to build an empire. We fought it to ensure that no species would ever again face what you faced under Hegemony rule." From the gallery reserved for liberated species came a voice. It belonged to Chancellor Mirlas of the Altarian Republic, a species that had been enslaved by the Hegemony for over 2 centuries. "Admiral Torres, how can we trust that humanity will keep its word? Power corrupts even the best intentions." Admiral Torres had expected this question. It was reasonable, even necessary. These species had lived under tyranny for so long that freedom seemed impossible. "Because," he replied, We have already had that power for 6 months, and we used it to free you, not enslave you. When our fleets appeared in hegemony space, we could have simply replaced the Zephyrians as your masters. Instead, we dismantled their empire and gave you back your worlds." He gestured toward the human honor guard behind him. "Every human ship in this galaxy is crewed by volunteers who swore an oath to protect the innocent and defend the weak. We don't fight for conquest. We fight for justice." Ambassador Chen stepped forward. "If I may add something, Admiral, the Terran Federation operates under a constitution that specifically forbids territorial expansion through conquest. Our colonies are established only on uninhabited worlds and only with the consent of nearby species. We cannot become an empire because our own laws prevent it." From another section of the gallery, a delegate from the Kepler Collective raised a tentacle. "What about species that don't want your protection? What if we prefer to defend ourselves?" "Then, you're free to do so," Admiral Torres replied immediately. "The protection accord is voluntary. Any species can request our assistance or ask us to leave their territory. We have no desire to force our help on anyone." The questions continued for hours. Species that had been silent under hegemony rule finally had the chance to speak freely. Some were grateful for humanity's intervention. Others were suspicious of their motives. All of them were trying to understand what this new galaxy would look like. Finally, Chancellor Vexara called for order. "Are there any final statements before this council votes on the proposed peace terms?" Admiral Torres stood once more. This was his chance to address the galaxy's future, to explain what humanity really wanted. 300 years ago, he began, the hegemony began its expansion by convincing the galaxy that might makes right, that advanced species had the right to rule primitive ones, that conquest was natural and inevitable. He paused, looking directly at Ambassador Kala. They were wrong. Might doesn't make right. It makes responsibility. When you have the power to protect the innocent, you use it. When you have the strength to stop injustice, you act. When you have the ability to free the enslaved, you do it." Around the chamber, delegates from dozens of species listened in silence. Many had never heard words like these from a powerful military leader. "Humanity didn't seek this responsibility," Admiral Torres continued. "It was forced on us when the hegemony came to our world with conquest in mind. But we accept it willingly. The galaxy has been ruled by fear for too long. From this day forward, it will be protected by those who choose to serve rather than conquer." He looked around the chamber one final time. "We offer you something the hegemony never did, a choice. Choose to build a better galaxy. Choose to work together instead of fighting each other. Choose freedom over slavery, cooperation over conquest, hope over fear." The vote was unanimous. Every species present approved the peace terms and the establishment of the Terran Protection Accord. Even former hegemony client states voted in favor, eager to distance themselves from their former masters. As the session ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Admiral Torres remained standing at the podium. Ambassador Chen approached him, a smile on her face. "Well, Admiral, you've just been appointed protector of the galaxy. How does it feel?" Torres watched through the crystal walls as human ships moved in formation around Nexus Prime. Mighty dreadnoughts and sleek destroyers, crewed by men and women who had volunteered to serve something greater than themselves. "Heavy," he replied honestly, "but necessary." In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change in ways no one had imagined. Species that had been enemies for centuries started talking to each other. Trade routes opened between worlds that had been isolated for generations. Scientific knowledge was shared freely instead of hoarded by conquering empires. The Terran Navy established bases throughout the galaxy, but not as conquerors. They were invited guests, protectors welcomed by species who had finally learned what it meant to be free. Human ships patrolled space lanes, ensuring that merchants could travel safely and that no species could threaten another. On Earth, construction yards worked around the clock to build the ships needed to maintain peace across thousands of worlds, but they also built exploration vessels, research stations, and colony ships. Humanity was expanding into the galaxy, but as partners rather than conquerors. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Sometimes the species that appears weakest is actually the strongest. Sometimes the prey is really the predator. And sometimes the greatest power is knowing when not to use the power you have. Admiral Torres kept his promise. The age of empires was over. The age of freedom had begun. And in the deep space monitoring stations around Earth, human sensors continued their eternal watch. Because somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, there might be other threats waiting. Other species that believed might makes right. If they came, they would find the same thing the Hegemony had found. Humanity was ready.